The first sign that humanity had returned was not a fleet, not a weapon, and not a declaration of war. It was a shadow appearing inside the Maw of Vare, a gravity storm so violent that even Dominion probes were torn into glittering dust before their signals could scream home. On the blockade station above the Silent Line, Commander Arvek Thal watched the impossible shapeform on his tactical display and felt every officer around him stop breathing. The storm should have crushed it. The radiation should have stripped its hull bare. The gravity shear should have twisted its frame into a ribbon of molten metal. Instead, the vessel drifted forward in perfect silence, black against the blue-white lightning of collapsed space, untouched by forces that had killed entire survey fleets. It was human. That was the part Arvek's mind rejected first. Human ships were ugly, slow things. Loud engines, fragile hulls, overbuilt life support systems, political slogans painted across metal like prayer marks. 40 years ago, the Dominion had sealed them behind the Silent Line under the language of protection, claiming humanity was too unstable, too young, too dangerous to be allowed free passage among civilized stars. Since then, every human launch had been tracked, every industrial moon monitored, every military yard measured down to its heat output. There was no record of this vessel. There was no permitted design matching its shape. There was no engine signature at all. "Classify it," Arvek said. His sensor officer did not answer immediately, and that silence was worse than panic. Lieutenant Saren was precise to the point of irritation, the sort of officer who corrected decimal errors in casual conversation. Now her scaled hands hovered above the console while the scan returned the same result again and again. "No classification available," she said finally. "No active propulsion. No detectable weapons. Hull composition unknown. Mass reading unstable." "Unstable how? It keeps changing." Arvek turned toward her. The vessel crossed another 1,000 kilometers without thrust. It did not accelerate. It did not coast. Space bent around it like cloth pulled over a hidden blade, and every gravity anchor on the blockade station screamed warnings as if the ship was not moving through the storm, but teaching the storm to move aside. Then the message arrived. Not on a military frequency. Not through encrypted diplomatic channels. It came across every open civilian band in the sector, clean, calm, and impossible to jam. "We are here to collect what was taken." The bridge went completely still. Arvek stared at the human vessel as the words repeated once, then vanished from every screen except the central display, where a single line of human text appeared beneath the ship's silhouette. UNC Alethea. Truth. A name, not a threat. That made it worse. "Commander," Saren whispered. The vessel did not cross the Silent Line. Arvek looked at the boundary markers glowing red across the void. The human ship was already inside Dominion-controlled space, sitting beyond the border without ever passing through it. Then where did it come from? Saren swallowed. Under it. By the time Commander Arvek Thal sent the emergency signal to Dominion High Command, the entire blockade station had already begun behaving like a machine that knew it was obsolete. Gravity anchors recalibrated without orders. Boundary alarms contradicted themselves. Long-range sensors kept trying to place the human vessel on one side of the Silent Line, then the other, then nowhere at all, as if the ship existed in a category the station had never been taught to recognize. Arvek stood before the central display with his hands locked behind his back, refusing to let his crew see the tremor that had begun in his fingers. He had been stationed at the Silent Line for 18 years. In that time, humanity had complained, petitioned, protested, threatened, negotiated, and once, memorably, sent a children's choir to sing at the boundary markers for 9 straight hours. Humans were irritating. Humans were emotional. Humans were persistent in the way water was persistent against stone. But they were contained. That had always been the comfort. 7 human systems behind the line. Monitored trade corridors. Approved fuel quotas. Inspected shipyards. Scientific development agreements written in language so polite that only trained diplomats noticed the chains inside them. The Dominion called it protective custody. Humanity called it a cage, though never in official documents, because humans had learned long ago that empires preferred their prisoners grateful. Arvek had believed the arrangement was necessary. Most Dominion officers did. Humans were too ambitious, too inventive, too quick to turn crisis into engineering and humiliation into doctrine. They had reached interstellar travel less than a century after nearly burning their own world into ash. They had made first contact by crashing an underpowered survey craft into a Dominion listening post, then apologizing while asking if anyone had coffee. A species like that needed supervision. That was what the report said. Now a human ship sat inside a lethal gravity storm, wearing silence like armor, and every report Arvek had ever trusted felt thin enough to tear. High Command is responding, Lieutenant Saren said. The main screen shifted to the seal of Dominion Naval Authority, then to the face of Marshal Odrin Vel, commander of the Regional Defense Lattice. Vel was old, silver-eyed, and carved from the sort of institutional confidence that made younger officers feel smaller by proximity. He did not waste time with greeting. Explain why I am seeing a human vessel inside restricted Dominion space. Arvek kept his voice controlled. Marshal, the vessel appeared inside the Maw of Vare approximately 6 minutes ago. It did not register on approach vectors. It did not cross the silent line. It broadcast one message on civilian bands. Vel's eyes narrowed. I heard the message. That meant the broadcast had traveled farther than the station had contained. Arvek felt the first real coldness settle into his chest. If civilian relays had caught it, then merchant ports, treaty observers, and half the border colonies might already be replaying the words. We are here to collect what was taken. Vel looked away from the screen, listening to someone off camera. For the first time, his expression shifted, not into fear, but into irritation sharpened by uncertainty. What does it want? We have not received further communication. Then hail it. Arvek hesitated. On what basis? Vel's stare hardened. On the basis that I gave you an order. The bridge audio channel opened. Saren aligned the transmission with the human vessel, though the signal map showed no receiving array, no comm dish, no surface antenna, nothing that resembled a conventional system. Arvek faced the display and forced his voice into the formal cadence of border command. Unidentified human vessel. This is Commander Arvek Thal of Dominion Blockade Station Vare 7. You are inside restricted space under the Silent Line Accord. Identify your command authority, your point of origin, and your purpose immediately. For 12 seconds, the only answer was the storm. Then a woman's voice came through, calm enough to make every Dominion officer on the bridge seem suddenly loud by comparison. Commander Thal, this is Captain Mara Voss of the UNC Alethea. Our authority is the United Nations Continuity Council. Our point of origin is not relevant to your current instruments. Our purpose has already been stated. Marshal Vel leaned closer from the high command feed. Arvek could feel him listening. Captain Voss, Arvek said. Your vessel is in violation of the Accord. No, she replied. Your map is in violation of reality. The words landed softly, but the bridge reacted as if something had struck the hull. Arvek heard someone inhale too sharply behind him. Saren's hands froze above her console. Even Vel said nothing for a moment, and that silence did more damage than anger could have. Mara Voss continued. We have not crossed your boundary. We have not armed weapons. We have not targeted your station. We have arrived at the location required to begin a lawful recovery process. There is no lawful recovery process inside Dominion restricted territory, Vel said, cutting into the channel. Marshal Odrin Vel, the human captain said, identifying him without pause. Regional Commander of the Defense Lattice. Your presence simplifies this. We request immediate access to the Dominion Archive on Caldrus Prime. The atmosphere on the bridge changed. Arvek had served long enough to understand when a room's fear found a new shape. Before, his crew had feared the ship. Now they feared the name. The Dominion Archive was not a military installation. Officially, it was a historical repository containing treaty records, migration permits, biological surveys, cultural exchanges, and archived legal disputes from 3,000 years of Dominion administration. It was a monument to order. That was what citizens were told during educational tours. But officers above a certain rank knew there were levels beneath the public archive. Sealed levels. Restricted levels. Rooms of forgotten decisions that had not been forgotten by the people who made them. Arvek knew little about those levels, and what little he knew, he had trained himself not to think about. Vel's face became dangerously still. The archive is not open to foreign military vessels. Then open it to a delegation, Mara said. One vessel. One captain. One witness team. No weapons displayed. No hostile action. We are giving the Dominion every possible opportunity to handle this correctly. Handle what correctly? Arvek asked before Vel could stop him. For the first time, Captain Voss did not answer immediately. On the display, the Alethea turned slightly inside the storm, though no thrusters fired and no inertia trail appeared behind it. Its black hull caught the lightning of the maw in thin silver veins, revealing markings etched along its side. Not slogans. Not warnings. Names. Thousands of them, written so small the station's optics had to magnify the hull to read even a fraction. Arvek saw human names, family names, colony names, dates, coordinates. Then he saw one line that made his stomach tighten. Cauldrus transfer record. Sealed by Dominion authority. Captain Mara Voss spoke again, and her calm had not broken, but something vast and buried moved beneath it. 40 years ago, you did not just put humanity behind a border, Commander. You took people from us before the border was signed. You erased them from every record you gave us. We are here for the proof. Marshal Vel's feet cut for half a second, then returned. That tiny interruption told Arvek more than any confession. The human vessel remained still inside the impossible storm, unarmed, patient, and surrounded by names the Dominion had never meant to see again. And then every screen on the blockade station began receiving an encrypted file from the Alethea, addressed not to High Command, not to the military, but to every civilian news relay within 6 sectors. The file did not open immediately. That was what frightened Commander Arvek more than if it had exploded across every civilian screen at once. The Alethea had not dumped its evidence recklessly into the sector. It had sent a locked package, cleanly formatted under Dominion legal codes, timed for public release unless High Command acknowledged receipt, and initiated an official archive access hearing within 1 standard hour. It was not a leak. It was not propaganda. It was procedure. That made it feel less like an attack and more like a door the Dominion had spent 40 years pretending was a wall. Marshal Vel's face returned to the main display, but the confidence was gone from the edges of it. Behind him, figures moved quickly through the command chamber, and their silence carried the particular violence of people trying not to be overheard while panic reorganized itself into policy. Commander Thal, Vel said, you will sever all civilian relay connections from Ver 7 immediately. Arvek looked toward Saren. Her hands were already moving, then stopped halfway. Marshal, she said carefully, the file is no longer routing through our station. Vel's eyes cut toward her. Explain. It is using our relay identifiers, but not our hardware. The transmission appears to be propagating through local gravitational lensing. For a moment no one spoke. Arvek turned slowly toward the human ship. It still sat inside the maw of Ver, black and silent beneath the storm's electric violence, as if the entire border system around it was merely weather. The idea that it could use gravity itself as a broadcast medium felt obscene. Not because it was destructive, but because it was elegant. Dominion systems controlled communication by controlling infrastructure. Towers, satellites, relay chains, choke points. Humanity had apparently looked at that control system and decided to speak through the curvature of space instead. Vel's jaw tightened. Can you block it? Saren swallowed. Not without changing the local mass distribution of the sector. Can you block it? Vel repeated. No, Marshal. The word remained on the bridge like smoke. Arvek expected Vel to rage. Instead, the Marshal went still again, and that was worse. Keep the human captain talking. Do not allow that file to release. The command feed ended. For 3 seconds, the bridge remained motionless. Then every officer looked at Arvek as if rank itself could protect them from history. He reopened the channel to the Alethea. Captain Voss, Dominion High Command is reviewing your request. No, Commander, Maravas replied. Dominion High Command is deciding whether it can still hide from it. The precision of the answer struck him harder than any insult would have. You are making accusations against a sovereign government. We are making a lawful recovery claim regarding missing human citizens, sealed colonial records, and unauthorized population transfer prior to treaty ratification. Arvek felt his throat tighten. The phrasing was too specific, too legal, too prepared. This was not anger thrown at a border. This had been built word by word over years. You expect us to believe humanity discovered sealed Dominion records from behind the silent line? No, Mara said. I expect you to wonder how many we already have. A new window opened on Arvek's side display before anyone touched the controls. Saren made a sharp sound and pulled her hands back from the console. The window showed a schematic of the Alethea. Not a full scan. Not enough to expose systems. Enough to humiliate every Dominion sensor package aimed at it. The ship was longer than the storm made it appear, narrow through the middle, with 3 ring-like structures folded into the hull rather than mounted outside it. No engine nozzles. No reactor plume. No acceleration chambers. Its power core was listed under a human designation that the translator rendered poorly. Contained singularity gradient lattice. Arvek stared at the words. Saren whispered, "That is not a drive. What is it?" She looked almost sick with fascination. It is a controlled gravitational collapse being held open inside a navigational frame. Arvek did not understand the physics, but he understood her voice. It was the voice of an officer looking at the edge of her education and realizing the edge was not the end of the map, only the end of what her teachers had permitted her to see. The Alethea sent another packet. This one contained material analysis, partial and deliberate. Hull elements derived from dead core planetary debris. Neutron-bound ceramic layers. Exotic thermal sinks made from compounds the Dominion Mining Guild had classified as industrial waste. None of it belonged in a functioning vessel. Half of it had appeared in Dominion databases for centuries under disposal categories. Humans had built their impossible ship from things the Dominion had thrown away. Saren's scales darkened along the neck. Commander, these compounds were never restricted. Why would they be? Arvek said quietly. Because no Dominion engineer had found a use for them. Because no threat model had marked them dangerous. Because no intelligence officer monitoring human trade had looked twice at shipments of worthless debris, failed ceramics, broken gravity lenses, and dead moon ore. Humanity had not hidden by becoming invisible. They had hidden by becoming boring. That realization moved through the bridge without anyone saying it aloud. Captain Voss spoke again. Commander, your station has 12 minutes before the first civilian relays begin asking why your government is suppressing a legal human recovery claim. You have 56 minutes before the evidence lock expires. You have less time than that before someone above you decides fear is strategy. Arvek looked at the countdown now glowing in the corner of his display. 56 minutes and falling. What do you want from me? He asked. There was a pause. When Mara answered, her voice was quieter, not softer, more dangerous because it sounded almost human in the old, painful sense of the word. I want you to look at the names on our hull and decide whether you are guarding a border or guarding a crime. Arvek had no answer. Outside the station viewport, the maw of Vare twisted around the Alethea in silent blue fire. The ship did not move. It did not threaten. It only waited with thousands of stolen names written across its skin. Then Lieutenant Saren spoke in a voice barely above a breath. Commander, High Command has launched 3 destroyer wings from Caldrus Prime. Arvek closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, the countdown read 54 minutes. And the human ship had still not raised a single weapon. The destroyer wings from Caldrus Prime arrived faster than regulations allowed. Commander Arvek Thal watched their approach vectors bloom across the tactical display in 3 tight formations, 9 ships total, all Dominion built, all military grade, all burning hot through the dark with the kind of aggressive acceleration normally reserved for piracy response or planetary siege. Their weapon systems were not fully charged, but they were warming. Their shields were already layered. Their transponders identified them as Archive Security Command, which meant they did not answer to the regional blockade office, and that told Arvek exactly how deep the panic had reached. They were not coming to defend the border. They were coming to defend the archive. The distinction settled into him like a weight. "Commander," Lieutenant Saren said, her voice controlled too tightly, "they are requesting tactical authority over Ver 7. Deny it." Every officer on the bridge turned toward him. Arvek did not look away from the display. "This is a blockade station under Regional Naval Command. Archive security has no operational authority here unless Marshal Vell transfers it personally." Saren hesitated. "They are repeating the request. Then they can repeat it until the storm dies." The bridge went quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. Before, they had feared the human ship. Now they were beginning to fear the Dominion response. That was a dangerous shift inside a military station, because soldiers could survive fear of an enemy. Fear of their own orders was harder to contain. The Alethea remained exactly where it had been, suspended inside the Maw of Ver with its dark hull untouched by the storm. The names etched across its surface glowed whenever gravity lightning split the void, appearing and vanishing like ghosts demanding to be counted. Arvek had stopped trying not to read them. There were too many. Names from Earth, Luna, Mars, Titan, Europa, and places he did not recognize. Family lines, settlement codes, birth registries, transfer dates. Some names had a symbol beside them, a small mark the translator could not explain. "What is that mark?" he asked. Saren followed his gaze. "Human notation, maybe?" "No. Ask them." The channel to the Alethea was still open. For several seconds, only the storm answered. Then Captain Maravas spoke. "The mark means a child." Arvek felt something in the bridge shift. He had expected a strategic answer, a technical answer, perhaps another controlled legal statement built to corner Dominion authority. He had not expected for words so simple that no officer could hide from them. Saren looked down at the magnified hull section. There were hundreds of marked names in that panel alone. "How many?" Arvek asked before he could stop himself. Mara did not answer immediately. When she did, the calm was still there, but now it sounded like something held in place by discipline rather than nature. On the first verified transfer list, 8,412. No one on Ver 7 moved. The lead destroyer wing opened a priority transmission, overriding normal channel etiquette with military force. A hard-faced Dominion captain appeared on Arvek's auxiliary display, wearing the silver collar of archive security. "Commander Thal, you are ordered to withdraw your station from the incident perimeter and relinquish direct engagement authority." Arvek stared at him. "By whose order?" "Directorate authority. That is not a naval command. It is higher than yours. That is not how command hierarchy works." The captain's eyes sharpened. "You are interfering with containment of a hostile misinformation operation." Arvek glanced at the Alethea, at the human names burning silently across its hull. "Is that what this is?" "It is what you will record it as." There it was. Not proof. Not investigation. Not the possibility of error. Just the old machinery of power, already reaching for language before the truth could reach the public. Arvek felt 18 years of loyalty strain under one sentence. Before he could respond, the Alethea transmitted again. This time the file opened a preview on every active screen within the blockade station. Not enough to trigger the public release. Enough to show what was waiting inside. A Dominion colonial transfer form appeared first. The header was old, predating the Silent Line Accord by 3 months. The document identified a human outpost called Haven 3, officially listed in human records as lost to reactor failure. Below the Dominion seal was a classification tag, Biological Adaptability Study. Population, 61,204. Survivors transferred. Local records erased. Human inquiry response. Accident confirmed. Arvek read the lines once, then again. His mind tried to protect itself by turning the words into bureaucracy. Population, transfer, classification, response, clean terms, safe terms, administrative terms. Then the next file appeared. A child's medical scan. Then another. Then an image of a classroom with human writing on the walls and empty chairs overturned on the floor. The bridge began to lose its military shape. One officer whispered a prayer under her breath. Another looked away. Saren did not. She stared at the files with wet black eyes and one hand pressed over her mouth. The archive security captain snarled, "Commander, cut your internal displays now." Arvek did not. The countdown continued. 41 minutes. Captain Maravas spoke across the open channel, and now every Dominion ship in range could hear her. "We did not come here to ask the Dominion to feel shame. Shame is private. This is evidence. Evidence belongs where crimes were hidden." The destroyer formations shifted. Saren's console flashed red. Weapons charging. Arvek's head snapped toward the display. "Target." She swallowed. "The Alethea." He opened a fleet-wide channel. "Archive security vessels, stand down. You are charging weapons inside an active gravity storm near a diplomatic claimant vessel." The Dominion captain answered coldly. "The human vessel is conducting hostile information warfare." "No," Arvek said, and surprised himself with the steadiness of it. "It is standing still." The words had barely left his mouth when the destroyers fired. Not a full broadside. A warning strike by Dominion standards, 3 focused plasma lances aimed across the Alethea's bow, close enough to scorch sensors, close enough to force reaction, not close enough to destroy. It was the kind of shot empires fired when they wanted the record to say restraint and the target to understand terror. The plasma entered the maw of Vare and bent. Arvek watched the beams curve away from the human ship as if space itself had refused the command. The lances twisted into spirals, folded around the Alethea's hull without touching it, then collapsed into thin rings of white fire that vanished into the ship's outer frame. For one impossible second, the Alethea shone. Not with damage, with power. Every gravity anchor on Vare 7 screamed. The maw's storm wall flattened outward, forced into a perfect circular calm around the human vessel. The destroyers staggered in their own inertial fields. The blockade station groaned as artificial gravity dipped, rose, then steadied. Saren's voice broke. "Commander." The human ship absorbed the strike. Arvek already knew. The Alethea's black hull now glowed with fine silver lines running between the names like veins beneath skin. The thousands of stolen dead and stolen living lit together across the ship, and for the first time since it appeared, the vessel moved. Only a little. Turned toward the destroyers. Captain Maravas's voice returned, still calm, but the bridge no longer mistook calm for peace. "Archive security vessels, you have fired on a lawful recovery delegation carrying evidence of crimes against human citizens. You will power down your weapons. You will hold position. And you will not make us prove a second time that we came here by choice, not because we had no other option." The destroyers did not answer. Their weapons continued charging. Then Saren looked up from her console, face pale under the tactical glow. "Commander," she whispered, "the Alethea is opening something beneath Cauldrus Prime." The first thing Commander Arvek Thal understood was that no one on his bridge understood what they were seeing. The tactical display did not show a weapon discharge. It did not show a missile launch, a dry flare, a targeting cone, or any of the familiar geometries that made violence legible to trained officers. It showed a circle forming beneath Cauldrus Prime, deep in the planet's gravity shadow, far below the orbital lanes and outside every defensive projection the Dominion had built around the archive world. The circle was not made of light. It was made of absence, a perfectly clean hole in the sensor field where space had stopped reporting what occupied it. Lieutenant Saren stared at the readings as if they were insulting her personally. "It is not a breach," she said. "It is not a portal either. I do not have a category for it." The archive security destroyers stopped charging weapons. That, more than anything, told Arvek the situation had changed. Soldiers did not lower guns because they understood danger. They lowered them because they realized they had misunderstood the room. Marshal Vell reappeared on the command feed, but this time there were more faces behind him. Directorate officials, military analysts, an elderly minister Arvek recognized from the public council broadcasts, and 2 figures in the pale robes of archive legal authority. Nobody was pretending this was a border incident anymore. What has the human vessel done? Vel demanded. Before Arvek could answer, Captain Maravas transmitted on an open channel. We have opened a witness corridor. The phrase meant nothing in Dominion tactical doctrine, but the effect became clear seconds later. Something emerged from the dark circle beneath Caldrus Prime. Not a ship. A signal. It rose from below the planet's defensive grid in a narrow column, passed through the Archive's orbital shell, ignored every encryption wall, and unfolded above the Maw of Vair as a field of human faces. The bridge lights dimmed automatically as thousands of translucent images filled the central display. Men, women, children, elderly, workers in colony overalls, teachers, medical technicians, miners, farmers, families standing in front of prefabricated habitat domes beneath unfamiliar skies. Some images were damaged. Some were incomplete. Some were only names paired with birth records and last known genetic signatures. But they were there. Not dead statistics. People. Saren made a sound Arvek had never heard from her before. The first face enlarged. A girl with dark hair tied badly at one side, smiling with missing front teeth. The translated record appeared beside her. Mira Solen. Age 6. Haven 3 Education Register. Official human record. Deceased in reactor failure. Dominion Archive record. Transferred alive to Caldrus Biological Adaptability Annex. Arvek felt the floor seemed to tilt beneath him. Another face replaced hers. Then another. Then hundreds. The Alethea was not dumping data randomly. It was sequencing the records with cruel, surgical clarity, matching human death notices against Dominion transfer files, matching false accident reports against sealed intake logs, matching missing colony shipments against biological trial inventories. High Command did not speak. Archive security did not speak. The Dominion itself, for one rare second, had no language ready. Captain Voss continued. The Dominion assumed we came here because we needed the archive to find them. The field of faces widened. Around Caldrus Prime, one by one, new signals ignited. Arvek watched the tactical map fill with contacts that had not been there moments earlier. Not 9. Not 20. Hundreds of points appeared across the outer system, each one small at first, then resolving into organized formations. Civilian ships, mining hulls, medical carriers, defense craft, old colony transports rebuilt with modern frames. They carried human transponders, but not the transponder codes of Earth's 7 sealed systems. Their registry tags came from places the Dominion said no longer existed. Haven 3, Lysithea Reach, New Carthage Outer, Vesper 12, Orizon Deep. 100 erased settlements answered from the dark. Arvek could not breathe for a moment. The missing humans were not only records. They were alive. Marshal Vel finally spoke, but his voice had become small. Impossible. Maravas answered him directly. No, Marshal. Inconvenient. On the display, the colony fleet around Caldrus Prime did not attack. It did not advance on the archive. It did not fire on the defense grid. It simply held position and began broadcasting the same witness package across civilian channels. Every ship carried names across its hull. Every transmission contained legal documentation, personal testimony, medical evidence, and one repeated statement in human diplomatic format. We were taken. We survived. We are here. The archive security captain who had fired on the Alethea appeared again on Arvek's auxiliary screen, but the authority had drained out of his face. Human vessels are surrounding Caldrus Prime. No, Captain Voss said. Human witnesses are surrounding the building that erased them. The difference mattered. Arvek knew it mattered because every Dominion officer listening understood it and hated that they understood it. A fleet could be attacked. A hostile encirclement could be broken. A military threat could be answered with military doctrine. But witnesses were different. Survivors were different. Children officially declared dead and now standing alive in the shadow of the archive were different. The Dominion had prepared for human revenge. It had not prepared for human testimony. The file countdown vanished from Arvek's display. In its place appeared a new timer. 30 minutes until full public release across all Dominion civilian networks. Saren looked at him. They changed the condition. Arvek read the attached notice. The legal formatting was perfect. The release would pause only if the Dominion granted immediate independent access to the archive, recognized the colony survivors as protected witnesses under interstellar law, and opened a public inquiry into the pre-accord transfers. It was not a demand for surrender. It was worse. It was a demand for truth under laws the Dominion itself had written. Marshal Vell's face hardened as he read the same notice. Arvek saw the calculation return. Not moral calculation. Political calculation. The old instinct searching for a way to contain what had already escaped. Commander Thal, Vell said, you are to classify all human contacts around Caldrus Prime as hostile formations. Arvek looked at the faces still moving across his display. Mira Solen appeared again for half a second, 6 years old forever in one record, alive somewhere in another. No, he said. The bridge went silent. Vell stared at him. Repeat that. Arvek's hands were no longer trembling. That surprised him. I will not classify civilian witness vessels as hostile without hostile action. You are refusing a direct order. I am refusing an illegal order. For a moment, the Dominion cracked open on the bridge of Ver 7. Not in battle. Not under bombardment. In the space between one officer's obedience and one officer's conscience. Then the Alethea transmitted one final image. It was not from the archive. It was recent. A massive hangar carved into a dead moon, filled with human ships under construction. Their black hulls marked with names instead of serial numbers. Not one vessel. Not one secret miracle. An entire generation of ships built in silence. Not hidden in fear, but waiting for the day evidence would need protection. Captain Mara Voss spoke, and now her voice carried the weight of every name glowing across the human hull. We are not here to search for our lost colonies. We found them 12 years ago. We are here because today the galaxy finds out why they were lost. The circle beneath Caldrus Prime widened, and from inside it, the first survivor delegation began to rise toward the archive. The survivor delegation rose from the witness corridor in 12 small vessels. Not warships, not escorts, not anything that could pretend to be a military threat. They were old colony shuttles with patched hulls and updated navigation spines, machines built for atmosphere, evacuation, and desperate landings on worlds that had never expected mercy. Each one carried a white human beacon, the universal signal for protected civilian passage, and each one broadcast its passenger manifest openly to every sensor in the Caldrus system. Archive security aimed weapons at them anyway. Commander Arvek Thal watched the targeting locks appear and felt the last clean part of his old loyalty break. They are locking onto civilian vessels, Saren said, though everyone could see it. Her voice sounded distant, as if she were reporting from the other side of a life she no longer recognized. On the main display, Captain Mara Voss did not move from her command chair. The Alethea still hovered inside the Maw of Ver, impossibly far from Caldrus Prime and yet somehow connected to everything happening there. The silver lines across its hull pulsed slowly, each stolen name briefly illuminated, then fading, then returning. It looked less like a ship now and more like a verdict taking the shape of metal. Marshal Vell's command feed filled the upper screen. All witness vessels are to halt before entering archive orbital jurisdiction. The lead colony shuttle answered, but not with a captain's voice. An old woman appeared on the channel, her face deeply lined, her silver hair tied back with a strip of blue cloth. Her name appeared below her image. Dr. Elian Morrow. Haven 3 survivor. Age at transfer, 19. Current age, 59. We are unarmed, she said. We are carrying personal testimony, genetic records, and original colony identifiers. We request lawful entry under Dominion Evidence Preservation Code. Vell did not look at her. He looked past her, as if refusing to see her might keep her from becoming real. You are not recognized citizens under Dominion law. Dr. Morrow gave a small, tired smile. That is part of the crime. The words moved across every open channel in the system. For a second, even the archive defense grid seemed to wait. Then Director Havis entered the feed. Arvek knew the name. Everyone above border rank knew it. Havis was not military. He was the head of the Archive Directorate, the quiet machinery beneath Dominion history. He was rarely seen in public and never in crisis broadcasts. His face was narrow, pale, and utterly composed. The face of a man who had spent a lifetime filing away consequences before they could become questions. "This proceeding is unlawful," Havis said. "The so-called survivor vessels are part of a coordinated human fabrication designed to destabilize Dominion authority. Archive security is authorized to prevent contamination of restricted evidence systems." Captain Voss finally leaned forward. "Director Havis," she said, "your predecessor signed the Haven 3 transfer order. Your office renewed the classification seal 6 times. Your personal authorization appears on the last denial of human inquiry 22 years ago. Choose your next words carefully. They will be taught." Havis blinked once. It was tiny, almost nothing, but across Verseven's bridge, every officer saw it. The old woman on the lead shuttle looked directly into the camera. "Let us land." Havis turned his head slightly, listening to someone beside him. Then his eyes hardened. "Disable the lead vessel." The order went out cleanly. Archive security fired. The beam crossed the orbital gap toward the lead shuttle, precise, narrow, meant to cripple engines without vaporizing the hull. It was the kind of shot that could be called non-lethal by anyone who did not have to sit inside the target and pray the definition held. It never reached her. Space folded. Not dramatically. Not with thunder. Not with fire. One instant, the beam existed. The next, it curved sharply away from the shuttle, twisted into a ring, and collapsed into nothing less than 50 meters from the hull. Then the Alethea moved. No one saw the journey. There was no transition to track. The ship that had been inside the Maw of Ver simply appeared above Caldrus Prime, directly between Archive security and the survivor delegation, its black hull filling the defensive grid with a mass reading that should have dragged every nearby satellite out of alignment. Alarms detonated across Verseven. Saren grabbed the edge of her console. "Commander!" It crossed 37 million kilometers without recorded transit. Arvek stared at the display, cold awe spreading through him. "No," he said quietly. "It did not cross it. It made the distance irrelevant." Archive security panicked. 6 destroyers fired at once. Plasma, kinetic interceptors, ion cutters, shield breaker pulses, every weapon selected for speed over permission. The volley struck the Alethea's hull in a white storm, and for one terrible second, the ship vanished inside the impact. Then the light cleared. The Alethea remained, unmarked. The names across its hull burned silver. Not one human vessel behind it had been touched. Captain Voss opened a channel to every ship in the system, and now there was no softness left in her calm. "You have fired on protected witnesses. You have fired on a recovery delegation. You have fired on us twice. This is your final warning." Havis shouted something off-screen. Archive security began charging again. Mara Voss closed her eyes for half a breath. When she opened them, the Alethea answered. It did not fire a projectile. It did not launch missiles. It did not kill. The gravity around the Archive security fleet simply changed. Every destroyer stopped at once. Not slowed. Stopped. 9 warships hung frozen in orbit, engines burning uselessly, weapons locked in half-charge, crews alive but trapped inside ships that no longer understood direction. Their shields folded inward like glass under pressure, then stabilized in harmless shells around their own hulls. Targeting systems went blind. Thrusters fired against themselves. Ammunition feeds disconnected. Reactor output dropped to emergency levels. The entire engagement lasted 4 seconds. Archive security had become a museum exhibit. On the civilian channels, the witness broadcast continued uninterrupted. Dr. Elian Morrow's shuttle passed beneath the silent, helpless destroyers and continued toward the Archive. Behind her, 11 more survivor vessels followed. None accelerated. None celebrated. They moved with the unbearable dignity of people who had already survived the worst thing their enemy could do. Across the Dominion networks, the locked evidence package opened early. Not because humanity triggered it. Because 3 civilian relay administrators watching the attack live broke protocol and released it themselves. The truth did not spread like a weapon. It spread like oxygen returning to a sealed room. Cauldrus Prime lit with emergency traffic. Council members demanded answers. Member species requested independent verification. News channels replayed the moment archive security fired on an old woman in a white beacon shuttle and the human ship crossed impossible distance to stand between witness and gun. Commander Arvek stood in the glow of collapsing certainty and understood that the Dominion had not lost a battle. It had lost the right to define what the battle was. Then Marshal Vell's feed returned, but his voice was no longer commanding. It was strained, furious, afraid. "Captain Voss," he said, "stand down your vessel or the Directorate will consider this an act of war." Mara Voss looked at the frozen destroyers, the descending witness shuttles, and the archive world beneath them. "No, Marshal," she said. "This is what restraint looks like." Then every sealed door in the Dominion archive opened at once. For 3,000 years, the Dominion archive had been designed to open only inward. Its public halls welcomed scholars, diplomats, treaty clerks, and school delegations beneath banners celebrating order, memory, and lawful civilization. Its lower levels accepted no visitors. They accepted orders, seals, classified evidence, genetic registries, erased migration logs, and the quiet remains of decisions too useful to confess. The doors down there did not have handles. They had authority. Now every door was open. On Cauldrus Prime, alarms rang through halls that had not heard uncontrolled sound in centuries. Archive personnel stood frozen as sealed vaults exposed themselves one level after another, not destroyed, not hacked into ruin, but unlocked with Dominion legal access codes attached to human evidence petitions, survivor identity claims, and emergency preservation warrants. The Aletheia had not broken the archive. It had forced the archive to obey its own laws. That was the part Director Havis could not survive. He appeared on the Emergency Council channel with his composure cracked into something sharp and ugly. Behind him, aides ran through white corridors while security officers shouted into dead comms. "This is an illegal intrusion into sovereign records," he said. "The human vessel is manipulating restricted systems. Any testimony gathered under these conditions is contaminated." Dr. Elian Morrow stepped into the archive's central receiving hall, leaning on a metal cane, surrounded by 11 survivor witnesses and watched by half the galaxy. She looked smaller than the room around her. The Dominion had built the hall to make petitioners feel that way. But when she raised her eyes to the towering walls of sealed memory, the room seemed to shrink instead. "I was 19 when your officers took me from Haven 3, she said. "I was told my family had died in a reactor accident. Later, I learned my family was told the same about me. Your contamination began before I entered this building." The broadcast carried her words into every council chamber, every military station, every civilian relay that had chosen not to look away. The Dominion could still command fleets, still seal borders, still threaten legal consequences, but it could not make the old woman disappear again. Too many people were watching her stand where her record had been buried. Commander Arvek Thal watched from Ver7 without speaking. Around him, his crew had stopped pretending to work. Saren stood with both hands resting on her console, tears darkening the fine scales below her eyes. No one reprimanded her. No one had the moral strength left for protocol. Marshal Vell came onto a private channel. His voice was low now, stripped of performance. "Commander Thal, you will restore station discipline and prepare for emergency military coordination." Arvek did not answer immediately. "Commander." "With respect, Marshal," Arvek said, though there was very little respect left in him. "Military coordination against whom?" "Against escalation. The humans are not escalating." Vell's eyes flashed. "They froze 9 Dominion destroyers over Cauldrus Prime. After those destroyers fired on civilian witnesses, they opened the archive by forcing legal compliance. They are humiliating the Dominion in front of every member species." Arvek looked at the broadcast, At Dr. Morrow placing her hand against a registry pillar as her identity scan returned a match the archive had hidden for 40 years. "No," he said. "The Dominion did that before they arrived." Vel stared at him as if seeing not an officer, but a fracture spreading through an institution. Then the Marshal cut the channel. On Caldrus Prime, the witness delegation reached the sealed biological annex. The doors opened before them with a sound like a breath held too long. Inside were rows of records, thousands of them, stacked in cold blue light. Human names, Dominion classifications, treatment histories, fertility controls, labor assignments, death notices falsified for Earth archives, relocation charts for survivors moved between hidden facilities. Every document had a seal. Every seal had a signature. Every signature belonged to someone who once believed secrecy was the same thing as safety. Then the Emperor called. His name was Solivar Ven, sovereign of the Dominion Compact, keeper of the 47-member mandates, heir to a system that had mistaken endurance for innocence. He did not call from a throne room. He called from a plain chamber with no banners behind him, no guards visible, no ceremonial light. It was a deliberate choice, and everyone watching understood that deliberate choices were the only language left to power when force had failed. Captain Maravas accepted the channel from the bridge of the Alethea. Behind her, the names on the hull were visible through the command deck's rear display, glowing faintly as if the ship itself was listening. "Captain Voss," the Emperor said, "I am prepared to authorize immediate recognition of all recovered human colonies, unrestricted movement beyond the silent line, emergency council observer status, and compensation hearings for affected populations." The bridge of Ver 7 went silent again. For 40 years, those concessions had been impossible. Now they were being offered in a single sentence. Maravas did not react. The Emperor continued. "In return, I ask that humanity suspend the public release of unrestricted archive material until a joint review body can determine what must remain sealed for interstellar stability." There it was. Not denial. Not apology. Containment wearing better clothes. Arvek felt the offer land across the system like a poison gift. Recognition. Borders opened. Colonies restored. A place at the table. Everything humanity had been denied, offered now under one condition. Let the Dominion control the truth one final time. Mara looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried no anger. That made it heavier. "Emperor Ven, if we wanted only movement rights, we could have crossed your line years ago. If we wanted only recognition, we could have forced a treaty at gunpoint. If we wanted compensation, we could have presented numbers instead of names." The Emperor's expression tightened. "We came for the record," she said. "The whole record. That record may destabilize 47-member worlds. It should." The word struck harder than any weapon the Alethea had used. Mara leaned forward slightly. "A stable lie is not peace. It is delayed collapse. Humanity lived inside your delay for 40 years. Our stolen colonies lived inside it longer. We are not here to inherit your silence." For the first time, Emperor Ven looked old. On Caldrus Prime, Dr. Morrow stood inside the biological annex as the archive projected the first complete Haven 3 transfer list into the air. Thousands of names spiraled upward in blue light. Some belonged to the living, some to the dead, some to children who had grown old without knowing which sky they had been born under. The public release timer resumed. 10 minutes. The Emperor looked away from Mara, then back. "If this proceeds uncontrolled, factions inside the Dominion will fracture. Some will blame humanity. Some will call for retaliation. Some species will question every treaty ever signed. You may win the truth and inherit chaos." Mara's face did not change, but something in her eyes did. Pain maybe, or memory, or the cost of refusing the easier victory. "We know," she said. "That is why we brought witnesses instead of bombs." 9 minutes. Across Caldrus Prime, the frozen destroyers remained suspended like warnings. Across Dominion space, civilian networks duplicated the evidence faster than sensors could name it. Across the silent line, 7 human systems waited for a signal that would decide whether their future began with justice or another controlled compromise. Then Director Havis vanished from the archive feed. Saren saw it first. "Commander, Directorate security teams are moving below the annex." Arvek stepped closer to the display. "Toward what?" She scanned, went pale and looked up. "Toward the original records vault. They are carrying thermal charges." On the Alethea, Captain Maravas heard the same report. The final proof was about to be burned. Captain Maravas did not raise her voice when the report reached her. She did not curse, did not threaten, did not give the Dominion the satisfaction of seeing rage loosen her discipline. She only looked at the tactical projection of Caldrus Prime, where Directorate security teams were descending toward the original records vault with thermal charges strapped to their backs. And for one terrible second, every human channel went silent. That silence did what shouting could not. Across 7 human systems, people understood that the final proof was not just data. It was the first record, the unedited order, the original crime before lawyers cleaned it, before ministers sealed it, before history became a museum display with blood washed from the floor. If Havis destroyed it, the truth would still survive, but the Dominion would spend centuries calling it disputed, incomplete, politically contaminated. Mara had not crossed impossible distance, carried the names of the erased across her hull, and held her fire under attack just to let the guilty leave one shadow untouched. "Director Havis," she said across every open channel, "remove your teams from the vault." No answer came. Inside the archive, Dr. Elian Morrow stood beneath the rising spiral of Haven 3 names, her cane gripped in both hands. Around her, the survivor delegation watched the lower-level security feeds appear on the wall. Armed Directorate officers moved through white corridors built under the building where their lives had been hidden. They were not running. That was worse. They moved with the calm of people who believed destruction was procedure. The Emperor's voice entered the channel, strained and cold. "Havis, stand down immediately." Still no answer. Then the thermal charges armed. Mara closed her hand once around the edge of her command chair. "Alethea, execute preservation protocol." For the first time, the ship spoke. Not an alarm. Not an artificial voice. A deep harmonic tone moved through the system, low enough to be felt in hull plating and bone. The gravity above Caldrus Prime changed again, but this time it did not touch the destroyers, the witness shuttles, or the archive towers. It reached beneath the surface, through stone, through shielded vaults, through every sealed floor, until it found the room where the original records waited to die. The charges did not explode. They aged. On every security feed, the thermal units rusted in the hands of the officers carrying them. Metal browned, cracked, collapsed into dust. Power cells drained into harmless ash. The weapons followed. Rifles corroded. Sidearms disassembled into flakes. Armor locks opened. The officers stumbled backward, untouched but stripped of every tool they had brought to erase the past. The vault door opened. Not outward, not inward. It became irrelevant. The original records rose from the darkness in sealed columns of light, lifted by gravity so precise it did not disturb the dust on the floor. Thousands of physical documents, genetic ledgers, command slates, intake logs, transfer orders, and mortality revisions ascended through the archives levels like buried bones returning to the surface. And then the first order appeared, signed by the Dominion Directorate, authorized before the Silent Line Accord. Population transfer approved. Human notification. False reactor incident. Children under 12. Retain for adaptability indexing. The galaxy saw it. There was no commentary, no dramatic music, no human speech trying to shape the moment. The evidence stood alone, and because it stood alone, it was devastating. Director Havis was arrested by his own security officers 12 minutes later. Not because they had become noble, but because the Emperor ordered it in public and no one left in the Dominion command structure wanted their name beside his when the next vault opened. By the end of the day, the Silent Line was suspended. By the end of the week, every treaty involving restricted species was placed under emergency review. By the end of the month, the Dominion no longer called humanity protected. It called humanity witness-bearing sovereign. But the moment that survived in human memory was smaller. It happened after the hearings began, after Dr. Elian Morrow placed her hand on the original Haven 3 registry and found her own name still there beneath the lie of her death. She stood before the council, surrounded by survivors, diplomats, and silent Dominion officials, and read the names of the first 50 children taken from the colony. Her voice shook only once. When she reached the name Mira Solen, Captain Marvas lowered her eyes. Commander Arvek Thal, watching from Ver 7, finally understood why the Alethea carried that name across its inner hull above all others. Mira Solen had not been a symbol chosen for strategy. She had been the first child erased. 6 years old, missing front teeth, declared dead by a government that had kept her alive only long enough to study what fear did to human adaptation. The Alethea was not named after a victory. It was named after what truth owed the dead. 3 days later, the ship crossed the silent line openly. No storm hit it. No treaty stopped it. Behind it came the witness fleets, the recovered colonies, and the 7 human systems that had spent 40 years being told patience was weakness. The boundary markers still floated there, gray and ugly, broadcasting their old warning into space. Beyond this point, you are not welcome. The Alethea passed them without firing. Then, one by one, the markers went silent as Dominion engineers shut them down under human observation. No explosion, no conquest, just the quiet death of a lie that had outlived its owners. Mara watched from the command deck as open stars filled the forward glass. For 40 years, the galaxy had mistaken humanity's restraint for fear. For 40 years, it had mistaken silence for obedience. Now every world knew the difference. Humanity had not come to burn the Dominion. Humanity had come to make it remember. And in the end, memory had done what no warship ever could.